First class isn't for black people. Move, or I'm calling security." The white flight attendant said it loud enough for everyone to hear, making sure all the wealthy white passengers knew she was protecting them from this black man in cheap clothes who obviously couldn't afford to be there, who must be using a fake ticket or stolen corporate code because black people don't belong in luxury spaces reserved for people with money, with class, with white skin that meant their presence was never questioned. She just warmly welcomed 6 white passengers in sweatpants without a single question. But this black man? She grabbed his boarding pass like stolen property, demanded his ID, his employment verification, asked humiliating questions she'd never asked anyone white, treating him like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses. The black man had experienced this 47 times in his life. Hotels, restaurants, stores, always the same. Black people don't belong in luxury spaces. But 30 minutes later, something worse happened. The black man noticed a critical safety issue, a malfunctioning emergency exit door. He tried to report it. The same flight attendant dismissed him again because she'd already decided his black voice didn't matter. That's when he made one phone call that grounded 13 aircraft, stranded 7,000 passengers, and exposed a 60% failure rate that would have killed everyone on board. They humiliated a black man at the gate. They had no idea that one call would shut down the entire airport and change aviation forever. The fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport burned with sterile intensity at 6:15 a.m. on a Friday in late autumn. Despite the early hour, the terminal hummed with controlled chaos. The smell of burnt coffee mixing with jet fuel, shoes squeaking on polished floors, rolling luggage clattering past gate after gate, automated announcements echoing off high ceilings. Somewhere a child cried. Someone shouted into a phone about a missed connection. This was the machine, the system, and it ran on rules, written and unwritten. In commercial aviation, an invisible hierarchy existed as rigid as any caste system. First-class passengers were treated like royalty, their comfort anticipated, their requests fulfilled instantly, their presence acknowledged with deference. Business class received professional courtesy. Premium economy got a nod. And regular economy? They were cargo that happened to breathe. Necessary for revenue, but not particularly valued beyond their ticket price. Flight attendants and gate agents were trained, sometimes explicitly, more often implicitly, to identify who belonged where. Not just by checking tickets, but by reading signals, expensive luggage, designer watches, confident postures, tailored clothing, the invisible uniform of wealth. And if you didn't send those signals, if you looked wrong for first class, you got extra scrutiny, extra questions, extra doubt. Calvin Ford understood this system intimately. He'd lived inside it for decades. At 52 years old, Calvin stood exactly 6 feet tall with a solid, healthy build. His skin was deep brown, his hair cut close with distinguished silver at the temples. His face was handsome in an understated way, strong jawline, thoughtful eyes that absorbed everything while revealing little, a mouth that smiled rarely but genuinely. This morning he wore clothes deliberately chosen to blend in, a simple navy polo shirt from a department store 3-pack, well-worn Levi's 501S faded at the knees, white New Balance sneakers with one fraying shoelace and a scuff on the right toe. He carried a 7-year-old REI backpack, fraying at one corner with a broken front zipper. No Toomey briefcase, no Rimowa luggage, no Rolex, just a $35 Casio watch from Target. To any observer, Calvin looked like a high school teacher on vacation, maybe an IT consultant heading to a regional conference. Certainly not someone who belonged in first class. But that was exactly the point. Calvin had money, significant money. The kind that could buy private jets, drivers, all the protective cushioning that insulated wealthy people from ordinary indignities. But he'd learned something important over 25 years building his fortune. You only see the truth of a system when you experience it without the protective cushion of obvious wealth. When people knew who you were, they showed their best behavior. When they didn't, they revealed their true values, their real assumptions, their actual priorities. Calvin wasn't just a passenger. He was a member of Skyward Airlines' board of directors, holding a 35% equity stake. He was CEO of Horizon Investment Group, managing a $4.2 billion aviation portfolio. He'd built his fortune from nothing, Son of a mechanic and a nurse in South Atlanta, full scholarship to Georgia Tech, MBA from Wharton, first job at an investment firm where he'd worked 18-hour days, started his own firm at 30 with 2 clients and a one-room office. Now, at 52, he was worth approximately $380 million. But nothing in his appearance revealed that. 2 years ago, Calvin had proposed ground truth auditing to the Skyward Board, executives flying commercially, unannounced, to experience what customers actually experienced. Not sanitized site visits where everyone knew the boss was coming, but raw reality. He'd flown 23 times in 18 months. Sometimes first class, sometimes economy. He'd seen excellent service and terrible service. He'd met flight attendants who genuinely cared and others who were burned out and bitter. But he'd never experienced anything like what was about to happen. 200 feet away at gate D23, Amanda Williams was preparing for flight Sky 2801 to San Francisco. As lead flight attendant, she'd been with Skyward for 15 years, long enough to develop strong instincts about passengers. Amanda was 38 years old. She'd started flying right out of college, wide-eyed and idealistic about the glamour of air travel. That idealism had been ground down by reality, by drunk passengers, entitled executives, screaming children, the physical toll of the job, eroded pay through bankruptcies, nights in cheap crew hotels. But she still took pride in her work. Every morning, Amanda was impeccably groomed, navy blazer with polished gold buttons, crisp white blouse professionally laundered, navy pencil skirt hitting exactly at her knee, hair in a tight French twist, subtle, perfect makeup, name badge gleaming. Amanda Williams, lead flight attendant, 15 years of service. She took pride in maintaining standards, a phrase she used often. Standards for uniforms, standards for service, standards for who belonged in first class and who didn't. That last one had become complicated 5 years ago. She still remembered the incident with perfect clarity. A Tuesday evening flight to Phoenix. A man had boarded first class wearing baggy jeans and a stained hoodie, carrying a torn duffel bag. No expensive luggage, no status markers, nervous and awkward. Amanda had assumed he'd gotten an upgrade. Someone who didn't belong might cause problems. She'd been right. 40 minutes in, he'd gotten violently drunk, harassed other passengers, particularly a young woman, refused to stop despite warnings. They'd made an emergency landing in Albuquerque. Police removed him in zip ties, 3-hour delay, formal complaint filed. After landing in Phoenix, Amanda's supervisor had pulled her aside. You let him on the plane. You saw him. You should have known there would be problems. But his ticket was valid. It's not about the ticket, Amanda. It's about judgment, about reading people. You should have flagged him. That's why we pay you to use your instincts. The write-up went into her file. It delayed her promotion by 2 years, costing her $15,000. It was mentioned in every review for 3 years. It became a black mark she had to overcome. The lesson she learned: trust your instincts. If someone doesn't look like they belong in first class, you're probably right. Better to question and be wrong than let someone through and be sorry. Better too careful than not careful enough. Since then, Amanda's instincts had become more suspicious, more focused on appearance and markers that distinguished real first-class passengers from imposters. Some might call it profiling. Amanda called it experience. She stood at gate D23 now, tablet glowing with the passenger manifest. 28 first-class seats, 26 booked, good load factor. She scanned names, cross-referencing with memory. Thomas Bennett, she knew him. CFO of a tech company, flew this route twice monthly, always professional, tipped well. Jennifer Hayes, regular passenger, pleasant, preferred champagne. David Richardson, she'd had him before, polite, straightforward. Then, Calvin Ford, seat 2A, corporate account she didn't recognize, TX, 4,187, no frequent flyer status, no VIP designation, no history. She made a mental note. Watch that one. At 7:30 a.m., passengers began arriving. Thomas Bennett appeared first, 50 years old, Tom Ford suit, Hermes tie, Toomey briefcase, Rimowa carry-on, Omega watch. Everything screamed, I belong here. Amanda greeted him warmly. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. Beautiful day for flying. Morning, Amanda. We should have a smooth flight today. Captain Anderson is flying, clear skies most of the way. Good to hear. She continued greeting first-class passengers with practiced charm, learning preferences, anticipating needs. This was the service that justified premium prices. At 7:35, Calvin walked from D19 to D23. He moved efficiently through the crowd, stepping aside for an elderly couple with heavy bags, making space for a mother with a stroller. He found a seat at D23 and reopened his laptop. To anyone watching, just another traveler working before boarding. Amanda saw him immediately. Her eyes tracked every detail. Plain polo, scuffed sneakers, cheap Casio watch, worn backpack. His face, a black man in his 50s, appearing completely ordinary. Her internal alarm pinged softly. Something doesn't match. This doesn't look like a typical first-class passenger. She walked past him casually, observing. Calvin didn't look up, just kept typing. His backpack was nylon, not leather. No jewelry. Nothing signaled wealth. Amanda decided, keep an eye on this one. Probably an upgrade. Might not understand first-class protocols. She didn't recognize it as profiling. She thought of it as experience. Also in the gate area was Helen Davis, 68, a retired elementary school teacher heading to San Francisco to meet her new granddaughter for the first time. Helen was flying economy, seat 24B, middle seat, but she didn't mind. She'd arrived early carrying a worn paperback romance novel. Helen was a black woman with short silver hair wearing a purple cardigan, black slacks, sensible flats. She carried a small purse with essentials. She settled into a seat with a good view and opened her book. But something else caught her attention. Helen had been black in America for 68 years. Grown up in Birmingham during segregation. Lived through the civil rights movement. Spent 40 years teaching children, trying to give them tools for a world that would judge them unfairly. She'd developed a sixth sense for discrimination, the ability to see when someone was being treated differently because of their skin color. She saw Amanda Williams watching that black man in plain clothes, and she recognized instantly the particular quality of that attention. The suspicion, the assessment, the prejudgment. Helen didn't know Calvin or Amanda, but she knew what she was seeing. She'd seen it thousands of times. She sighed quietly and tried to return to her book, but she'd lost her place. Her mind was elsewhere, watching something she'd seen too many times before. She'd seen this movie before, and it never had a happy ending. Minutes ticked by. More passengers arrived. The gate area filled with pre-boarding energy, people standing to position themselves near the desk, others absorbed in phones, a few pacing nervously. Calvin remained focused on his laptop, reviewing Skyward Airlines' quarterly operational metrics, revenue per seat mile, load factors, customer satisfaction scores, safety incident reports, the kind of analysis only a handful of people in the company ever saw. Because this wasn't just another flight for Calvin. This was part of his ongoing assessment of how Skyward actually treated customers when no one important was watching. This was ground truth auditing in action, experiencing the system without the protective cushion of status. He'd experienced discrimination 46 times before in his life, questioned at hotels, restaurants, country clubs, stores. Each time he'd made a choice, fight or let it go. Each time the calculation was different, but there was a question that had been growing louder. At what point does silence become complicity? At what point does letting it slide mean you're accepting that this is just how the world works? Calvin didn't know yet if today would be number 47, but he was about to find out. Amanda continued her preparations, reviewing the manifest, checking with the gate agent about any last-minute changes, ensuring everything was ready for an on-time departure. She prided herself on running efficient operations, on maintaining standards, on keeping first-class passengers happy. She glanced at Calvin one more time, still typing on his laptop, still looking ordinary, unremarkable, out of place for first class. She made another mental note. Definitely watch him during boarding. The clock moved towards 7:40. Boarding would begin soon. The machine was about to start its sequence. Passengers flowing from terminal to aircraft, each to their assigned place in the hierarchy, and that's when everything would begin to go wrong. Thomas Bennett checked his watch, an Omega that had cost $8,000, right on schedule. He liked predictability, efficiency, smooth operations. He expected his flight would be exactly that. Helen Davis marked her page in her book, though she wasn't really reading anymore. She was watching, observing, bearing witness to something she sensed was about to unfold. Calvin saved his work and closed his laptop. He checked his phone one last time, no urgent messages, put it in his pocket, prepared to board. Amanda took a deep breath. Another day, another flight. Maintain standards. Keep things running smoothly. Trust your instincts. That's what they paid her for. She looked at her tablet one more time. Calvin Ford, seat 2A, corporate account TX 4187. Something about it felt off. She couldn't articulate exactly what. But 15 years of experience and one very expensive lesson had taught her to trust that feeling. She would watch him carefully during boarding, just to be safe, just to maintain standards, just to do her job the way she'd been trained to do it. The PA system crackled to life. The gate agent's voice, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll begin boarding flight 2801 to San Francisco momentarily." Everything was about to change, but nobody knew it yet. At 7:42 a.m., the gate agent's voice came over the PA system with the standard announcement that happened at every gate in every airport. "We're now boarding first class and Zone 1 passengers for flight 2801 to San Francisco. First class and Zone 1, welcome aboard." The announcement triggered the usual response. People who weren't in first class began standing anyway, positioning themselves near the gate desk, creating a crowd that served no real purpose. People in Zone 3 hovering near the Zone 1 boarding area, as if physical proximity would somehow get them on the plane faster. Human nature responding to perceived scarcity even when there was none. Calvin stood, shouldered his backpack, and got in line. He positioned himself behind 4 other first-class passengers, waiting patiently without checking his phone or fidgeting, just standing there with the calm of someone who'd done this thousands of times. In front of him, Thomas Bennett with his Ramawa clicking on the floor. A woman in her 60s wearing expensive jewelry and carrying a Louis Vuitton bag. A man in his 40s in a business suit with a Toomey briefcase. A younger woman in business attire typing on her phone even as she shuffled forward. One by one, they approached the gate desk where Eric Johnson, a 26-year-old gate agent who'd been with Skyward for 3 years, scanned boarding passes with practiced efficiency. Thomas Bennett stepped up. Beep. Green light on the scanner. "Have a great flight, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for your business." The woman with jewelry. Beep. Green light. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. Enjoy your flight to San Francisco." The man in the suit. Beep. Green light. "Thank you, sir. Have a wonderful flight." The younger woman. Beep. Green light. "Safe travels today." Then Calvin stepped forward. He smiled at Eric, a genuine smile, the kind that acknowledged shared humanity, and handed over his boarding pass. It was printed paper, not mobile. Some security experts recommended paper because it couldn't be remotely hacked. Calvin just liked having a physical backup. Eric scanned it without hesitation. Beep, green light. The screen showed Ford Calvin, seat 02A, first class. Seat 2A, first class. Eric looked up, made eye contact, smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Ford. Have a wonderful flight this morning. Weather looks perfect all the way to California." "Thanks, I appreciate that." Calvin took his boarding pass back and walked toward the jet bridge, that accordion tunnel connecting terminal to aircraft. This was the moment when everything could have gone differently. If Amanda had been distracted, if she'd been in the break room, if she'd made different choices 5 years ago, if any of 1,000 variables had been slightly different. But she was standing right there at the entrance to the jet bridge, tablet in hand, glowing with the passenger manifest. She'd positioned herself strategically, an unofficial secondary screening she conducted on flights when she had time, not in any manual, not part of official procedure, but something she felt was her responsibility as lead flight attendant. She saw Calvin approaching, saw the plain polo shirt, the worn backpack, the scuffed sneakers, the cheap watch, his casual walk, his face, a black man in his 50s who didn't look like he belonged in first class, and she made a decision. She stepped directly into his path, blocking the jet bridge entrance completely. Not just inserting herself for a quick question, she physically positioned herself as a barrier. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was cold, professional, but with an edge of authority. "I need to see your boarding pass." Calvin stopped. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, of weariness, of here we go again, but his face remained neutral. "Of course." His voice was even, polite, showing no irritation. He pulled the boarding pass from his pocket and handed it over. Amanda took it, examined it with theatrical intensity. She looked at the pass, then at Calvin's face, then back at the pass, then at her tablet, then back at the pass. Her eyes narrowed. She held it up to the light as if checking for forgery. Calvin Ford, Seat 2A, First Class, Skyward Airlines, Flight 2801. Everything was legitimate. Everything was in order. The pass had been scanned 20 seconds ago by Eric right in front of her. But something in Amanda's mind whispered, "This doesn't look right." "Mr. Ford." She pronounced his name slowly, carefully, as if testing whether it was real. "This boarding pass shows Seat 2A First Class. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am. That's my assigned seat." "And you purchased this ticket yourself?" "It was purchased through my company's corporate account." Amanda's eyebrows rose slightly. "Corporate account." She made it sound suspicious. "Which company?" "I don't see how that's relevant to my boarding." "Sir, I'm asking a simple question. Which company purchased this ticket?" Behind Calvin, other passengers were beginning to pile up. They had to squeeze past this strange tableau, a flight attendant apparently interrogating a passenger before he could even enter the aircraft. A few showed annoyance at the delay. Others looked curious. Some seemed uncomfortable, sensing something wrong about this interaction. Thomas Bennett walked by, his Rimowa clicking on the jet bridge floor. He had to navigate around Amanda and Calvin. His eyes met Calvin's for half a second. There was something in that glance, a flash of recognition that something wasn't right here. But Thomas said nothing, just kept walking. Not his problem, not his business. "May I also see your ID, please?" Amanda's voice had shifted from questioning to demanding. Calvin didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't ask why she was asking him questions she hadn't asked the 6 white passengers who'd boarded before him. He simply reached for his wallet, pulled out his Georgia driver's license, and handed it to her. His movements were deliberate, calm, the movements of someone who'd been through this before. Amanda examined the ID with the same theatrical intensity. Calvin Charles Ford, born April 15, 1973, height 6'0", weight 190 pounds, address 2849 Piedmont Road, NE, Atlanta, Georgia 30305. That was actually a good neighborhood, she noted. Buckhead area. The photo matched. The name matched. Everything was legitimate. But she didn't step aside. She pulled out her phone and stepped a few feet away, but her voice was still audible to Calvin and the growing crowd of passengers trying to board. "Hi, this is Amanda Williams, lead flight attendant on Flight Sky 2801. I need to verify a first-class passenger. Calvin Ford, FORD, Seat 2A, corporate account code TX 4187. "Yes, I'll hold." Calvin stood there, backpack in hand, watching passengers stream past him with curious or uncomfortable glances. He checked his watch, 7:46 a.m. They were supposed to depart at 8 o'clock. This delay was eating into their departure buffer. From the gate area, Helen Davis had stood up from her seat. She'd been watching this entire exchange from the beginning. She walked closer, not right up to the jet bridge. She hadn't been called for her zone yet, but close enough to hear, close enough to be a witness. She recognized what she was seeing. She'd seen it thousands of times in her 68 years. 30 seconds, 45, 1 minute. Amanda's phone conversation continued. "Yes, Purchased when? 3 weeks ago. Through which corporate account? TX 4187. And when was it booked? 3 weeks in advance. Any flags on this passenger? Any notes? No? What about the payment method? Corporate credit card. And that's verified? Okay. All right. Thank you." She hung up and walked back to Calvin. Her expression hadn't changed. Still suspicious, still guarded, still certain something wasn't right, even though every verification had come back clean. "Mr. Ford, your ticket was purchased through a corporate account. I need you to verify your employment." Calvin looked at her steadily. "Why?" "It's standard procedure for corporate account verifications." "Is it?" Calvin gestured subtly toward the jet bridge where Thomas Bennett and 5 other passengers had walked through without any questions. "Did you verify employment for any of them?" Amanda's jaw tightened. "Sir, each passenger is assessed on a case-by-case basis. Based on what criteria? Based on my professional judgment as lead flight attendant." "And your professional judgment requires you to verify my employment, but not theirs. Can you explain what specific factors about my ticket or my appearance prompted this different treatment?" The question was calm, almost academic, as if Calvin were genuinely curious about airline procedures rather than pointing out obvious discrimination. Amanda felt trapped. She couldn't say what she was thinking, that he didn't look like someone who belonged in first class, that something about him seemed off, that her instincts were screaming he was an upgraded passenger who might cause problems, so she fell back on authority. "Sir, I have the discretion to request additional verification from any passenger. If you're unwilling to provide the information I'm requesting, I cannot allow you to board this aircraft." Calvin's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're saying you won't let me board?" "Not until you've answered my questions to my satisfaction." "I've shown you my valid boarding pass. I've shown you my valid ID that matches the boarding pass. Your own ticketing system has verified the purchase. What additional verification could you possibly need?" "Corporate account purchases require employment verification. That's policy." "Then show me that policy in writing." Amanda's face flushed. "Sir, I don't have time to... because I don't believe that policy exists. I believe you're making up reasons to deny me boarding because of how I look." Several passengers had stopped now, no longer pretending not to watch. This was becoming a scene. The crowd backing up into the gate area, people craning their necks to see what was happening. From the gate area, Helen Davis's voice rang out, strong and clear. "Let that man board. His ticket is valid. We all saw it get scanned. This is discrimination, plain and simple." Amanda spun around. "Ma'am, please do not interfere with crew operations." "I'm not interfering. I'm bearing witness. I'm watching you harass a black passenger in ways you didn't harass a single white passenger. That's not crew operations. That's racial profiling." A murmur ran through the growing crowd, people shifting uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement with Helen, others looking away, not wanting to get involved. A few pulling out phones, starting to record. Amanda felt control slipping. She pulled out her radio, her voice tight. "Gate D23 to operations. I need a supervisor at Gate D23 for a boarding issue. Possible security concern. Please respond immediately." Static then. "Copy that, manager en route. ETA 2 minutes. Calvin remained where he was, standing calmly just outside the jet bridge entrance. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made any aggressive moves, just stood there, a black man with a valid ticket being denied boarding while everyone watched. He checked his watch again, 7:49 a.m., 11 minutes late on boarding now. Inside the aircraft, Sarah Mitchell heard the commotion at the door. She stepped out of the galley and saw Amanda on her radio, saw a black passenger standing to the side, saw the growing crowd in the gate area, saw phones being raised to record. She walked forward quietly. "Amanda, is everything okay?" Amanda's voice was sharp, stressed. "I'm handling it, Sarah." "But his boarding pass was scanned, right? The gate agent cleared him?" "Yes, but I'm exercising my discretion as lead flight attendant." Sarah glanced at Calvin, then back at Amanda. She wanted to say something, wanted to point out that this didn't look right, that Amanda was creating a problem where none existed, that they were behind schedule and this was making it worse. But Amanda was her supervisor. Amanda had 15 years of experience. Sarah had been flying for 3 years, so she swallowed her objections. "Okay, let me know if you need anything." She retreated back into the aircraft, the weight of her own silence already beginning to press on her conscience. At 7:51 a.m., Brandon Cooper arrived, Airport Operations Manager, ex-Air Force, 38 years old, responsible for keeping Terminal D running smoothly. He was out of breath from jogging through the terminal after getting the radio call about a security concern. He took in the scene immediately. Amanda standing guard at the jet bridge entrance. Calvin standing calmly to the side, boarding pass and ID in hand. A crowd of at least 50 people in the gate area watching. Several phones recording. This was a PR nightmare in the making. "What's the situation?" His voice was professional but tight. Amanda launched into her explanation. This passenger presented a first-class boarding pass, but there were irregularities that required additional verification. Corporate account code that didn't match standard vendor lists. Vague responses about his employment. Suspicious behavior during questioning. I determined... Stop! Brandon held up his hand. He turned to Calvin. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass and ID?" Calvin handed them over without a word. Brandon examined both. Everything matched. He pulled out his tablet, called up the reservation. Corporate account TX 4,187, Horizon Investment Group. Ticket purchased 3 weeks in advance, paid in full, no flags, no issues, no security concerns, nothing irregular at all. He looked at Amanda, his expression hardening. What specific irregularity did you identify? The corporate account code TX 4187 is a valid corporate account in good standing. It's been used to purchase hundreds of tickets with us over the past 5 years. What made you flag this particular transaction? Amanda hesitated. It was a judgment call based on my experience. Based on what aspect of your experience? Be specific. The passenger didn't present the typical profile for first-class travel. No luxury luggage, no status markers, dressed casually, so you profiled him based on his appearance. I assessed potential risk based on observable factors. You profiled him. A black man in casual clothes who you decided didn't look right for first class. Brandon's voice was cold now, cutting through Amanda's carefully crafted justifications. I was being cautious. Did you question any white passengers boarding first class this morning? Silence. Did you? No, but did any of them dress casually, jeans and t-shirts, sweatpants? Amanda's face went pale. She'd greeted at least 3 white passengers in casual attire without a single question. Brandon turned to Calvin. Mr. Ford, I apologize on behalf of Skyward Airlines. You have a valid ticket. You have valid identification. There is no legitimate reason for this delay. You're cleared to board immediately. Amanda's voice rose in protest. I have discretion as lead flight attendant to refuse boarding if I believe there's a security concern. Brandon cut her off, his voice like ice. What security concern? Articulate the specific, concrete security concern you've identified beyond this passenger's appearance. His evasive answers during my questioning. Evasive? He asked you to explain why you were treating him differently than white passengers. That's not evasion. That's calling out discrimination. Calvin spoke quietly, his voice measured but firm. Actually, before I board, I need something clarified. Is Miss Williams formally denying me boarding to first class? Brandon looked surprised. No, you're cleared, Calvin interrupted gently. I'm asking her. Miss Williams, are you exercising your authority as lead flight attendant to deny me boarding to the first-class cabin on this aircraft? Amanda felt every eye on her. Brandon's cold stare, Calvin's calm gaze, 50 passengers watching, multiple phones recording. She was trapped. If she said yes, she was explicitly denying a valid passenger based on what was obviously discrimination. If she said no, she was admitting she'd wasted 15 minutes on theater and intimidation. But her pride wouldn't let her back down completely. I am recommending alternative accommodations. We have availability in economy where you could be reseated while we complete our verification process. That's a denial. Calvin's voice was still calm. You're denying me the seat I purchased, that I have a valid ticket for, and offering me a worse alternative that I didn't pay for. That's a denial of service. It's a temporary accommodation. No. Answer yes or no. Are you denying me boarding to first-class seat 2A? The seconds stretched. Amanda looked at Brandon, hoping he'd give her an out. But his expression was stone. Finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I am exercising my discretion to deny you boarding to first class pending further verification. Thank you for clarifying that. Calvin pulled out his phone. Amanda's hand moved toward him. Sir, you cannot. Don't touch me. Calvin's voice was quiet but absolutely firm. Step back. Brandon immediately moved between them. Amanda, step away, now! Calvin was already dialing. The phone rang twice, then a woman's voice. Calvin? Is everything all right? Calvin spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Patricia, I need you to conference in Brandon Cooper from Atlanta Airport Operations and Daniel Moore from the FAA immediately. I've been formally denied first-class boarding on Flight Sky 2801 despite having valid documents. The lead flight attendant has explicitly refused to allow me to board. Every head in first class turned. Thomas Bennett's mouth fell open. Amanda looked like she might faint. Brandon's eyes widened in recognition. Patricia? FAA? Patricia Taylor's voice came through the phone, sharp with concern. What? Who denied you? Calvin, are you? Hold on, I'm getting Brandon and the FAA now. Clicking sounds. Hold music for 10 seconds that felt like an eternity. Amanda stood frozen. watching this ordinary-looking passenger who apparently had the executive vice president of Skyward Airlines on speed dial. A new voice joined, authoritative. "Brandon Cooper here. What's the situation?" "Brandon, I'm standing at gate D23 right now. Mr. Cooper should be right next to me." The Brandon Cooper at the gate looked at his phone in confusion, then understanding dawned. "Wait, you're calling about yourself? You're Calvin Ford?" Calvin gave him a tired smile. "Yes, Brandon. I'm Calvin Ford, Skyward board member, and I've just been denied first-class boarding by one of your lead flight attendants." The color drained from Brandon's face. He'd just been standing next to a board member, the board member who held 35% equity in the airline, while that board member was being racially profiled and denied service. A third voice joined the call. "This is Daniel Moore, FAA Regional Administrator. Someone want to tell me what's going on?" Patricia's voice, tight with barely controlled anger. "Daniel Calvin Ford, Skyward board member, has been denied boarding to a first-class seat he has a valid ticket for. Apparently, one of our flight attendants has decided that a black man in casual clothes doesn't belong in first class." "Jesus Christ." Moore's voice was a mixture of exasperation and professional concern. "Put the flight attendant on the line, now!" Brandon looked at Amanda, his expression a mixture of fury and something close to pity. "Amanda, the FAA Regional Administrator wants to speak with you." Amanda's hands shook as Brandon held out his phone. She took it, her voice barely audible. "This is Amanda Williams." Daniel Moore's voice was crisp, professional, federal. "Miss Williams, on what grounds did you deny Mr. Ford boarding to first class?" There were irregularities with his corporate account that needed verification." "What irregularities specifically?" "The account code didn't match our standard vendor list. I'm looking at that account right now. TX 4187 Horizon Investment Group. It's been active with your airline for 5 years, hundreds of transactions, perfect payment history. What made you flag this specific transaction?" Silence. "Miss Williams, I'm waiting. I made a judgment call based on observable factors, such as his appearance, his responses to my questions, the overall context." "His appearance. You mean the fact that he's a black man in casual clothes?" That wasn't..." "Miss Williams, I'm recommending an investigation into this incident for potential violation of federal anti-discrimination regulations in air travel. You've denied boarding to a passenger with valid documents based on what appears to be racial profiling. Brandon, I want a full incident report within 24 hours. Miss Williams, you're grounded pending investigation." Amanda's world collapsed in that moment. 15 years of her career gone. "Sir, I was following my training. If your training taught you to profile black passengers, then your training is the problem, and that's something the FAA needs to investigate as well. Now, let Mr. Ford board his flight." She handed the phone back to Brandon, tears starting to form in her eyes. Calvin took his own phone off speaker. "Patricia, Daniel, thank you for responding. I'll let you know if there are any other issues." He paused. "And Patricia, when I get to San Francisco, we need to talk about safety culture, but that's a separate conversation." He hung up and looked at Amanda. Her face was ashen, tears threatening to spill. He felt no satisfaction in this moment, only weariness and a bone-deep frustration that it had come to this, that he'd had to use his position, his connections, his power just to access a seat he'd paid for. "I didn't want this," he said quietly, only to her. "I wanted you to treat me the way you treated everyone else. That's all. Just basic human dignity." He walked past her into the jet bridge. Brandon turned to Amanda, his voice low and hard. "Conference room. Now, after this flight departs, we're going to have a very serious conversation about what just happened and why you no longer have a job with this airline. Mr. Cooper, please. You denied boarding to a board member. You racially profiled a passenger. You created a PR nightmare with 50 witnesses and video evidence. There is no scenario where you keep your job. The only question is whether you face federal charges." He turned to the crowd of passengers still waiting to board, many with their phones out. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Boarding will continue now." Inside the aircraft, Calvin made his way to seat 2A window seat, second row, exactly what he'd paid for. He stowed his backpack in the overhead bin and sat down. Thomas Bennett sat across the aisle in 2C. He looked shaken. I'm so sorry. That was completely out of line. Are you okay? Calvan managed a tired smile. I'm all right. Thank you for asking. I should have said something. At the gate, when she was questioning you, I saw what was happening. I knew it was wrong, and I just walked past. I told myself it wasn't my business. And now? Thomas met his eyes. Now I understand that silence makes me complicit. Next time, and there will be a next time, somewhere, somehow, I won't be silent. I promise you that. Calvan nodded. Good. Hold yourself to that promise. Boarding continued. The cabin filled slowly, passengers whispering among themselves about what they'd just witnessed. Some looked at Calvan with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with what might have been newfound respect. The last passengers filed in. The door closed with a heavy thunk. The captain's voice came over the PA. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. But Calvin could see Sarah Mitchell at the forward galley, tears in her eyes, looking at where Amanda should have been. Could sense the tension in the cabin, could feel that something more was wrong, beyond just the discrimination he'd faced. This wasn't over. The worst was still to come. But he'd made it onto the plane. Number 47 had escalated in a way the previous 46 incidents never had. He'd been forced to use his power, his position, his connections, just to access a service he'd paid for. And that realization sat heavy in his chest as the aircraft began to push back from the gate. The cabin filled. Amanda began pre-flight beverage service. Row 1. Good morning. Champagne or orange juice? Radiant smile. Row 2, see Thomas Bennett. Your usual, Mr. Bennett? Warm, friendly. Row 2A, Calvin. Sir, would you like a beverage? Cold, no smile. Water, please. Amanda poured water into a plastic bottle, not a glass, and placed it on his tray. No napkin, no warmth. Then moved on, brightness returning instantly for row 3. Microaggressions, the tiny cuts that accumulated. The door closed, engines powered up, the plane began pushing back. Sarah Mitchell conducted final safety checks. When she reached the emergency exit by Calvin's seat, door 2L, she paused, checked the door seal, the handle, the control panel. Then she noticed the status indicator was blinking. Red, orange, green, red, orange, green. Amanda? Exit door 2L has a warning light. Amanda came over. Probably a sensor glitch. Reset it. Sarah pressed the reset button. The light went solid green for 3 seconds, then started blinking again. It's still doing it. We should report this to the captain. Sarah, if we reported every sensor glitch, we'd never take off. The maintenance logs show this aircraft passed inspection this morning. Just reset it again. Sarah reset it. This time it stayed green. See? Fixed! Calvan, sitting 2 feet away, had heard everything. He looked up. Excuse me, is there a problem with the door? Amanda turned cold. No, sir. Everything is fine. I heard about a warning light. It's been resolved. Was it reported to the captain? That's not necessary. Calvan pulled out his phone and typed, Exit door 2L warning light malfunction, red-orange-green pattern, reset twice. Flight attendant A. Williams refused to report. Flight Sky 2801, 8:05 a.m. Amanda saw him typing. Sir, your phone needs to be in airplane mode. I'm documenting a safety concern. Put it away now. In a moment. He finished, saved, switched to airplane mode. Done. Amanda stared with barely concealed anger, then walked away. Sarah stood there, caught between concern and authority. Calvin spoke quietly. You tried to do the right thing. Thank you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I should have insisted. It's not your fault. Remember this feeling. Don't let it happen again. The aircraft taxied toward the runway. 4 planes ahead. Calvan watched through the window. He had a choice. Let it go. 1 warning light, probably nothing. Or escalate, causing massive disruption but potentially preventing disaster. He thought about the 47 times he'd stayed silent, about how silence enables broken systems, about having power and the responsibility to use it. The plane moved forward, 3 ahead. He thought about discrimination creating blind spots, about Amanda dismissing his concern because she'd already decided he wasn't credible. 2 ahead. He thought about the 180 people on this plane. Someone's child, parent, spouse, 1 ahead. Calvin made his decision. He took his phone off airplane mode. Amanda saw it immediately. Sir, your phone? I'm making a phone call. You cannot. This is an emergency. Calvan stood up, hand raised in a firm stop gesture. "Do not touch me, step back." His voice wasn't loud, but it had authority. Several passengers turned. The phone connected. "Calvan, is everything all right?" Calvan spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Patricia, I need you to conference in Daniel Moore at the FAA immediately. We have a critical safety situation on Flight Sky 2801. Amanda froze. "Patricia? FAA?" Every eye in first class turned to Calvin. Thomas Bennett's mouth opened. Amanda looked like she might faint. The machine had just broken, and everything was about to change. Patricia Taylor's voice came through the phone, crisp and professional, but edged with concern. "Talk to me. What's the situation?" Calvin spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the first-class cabin where every passenger had stopped to listen. Every conversation ceased. Every phone lowered. This was the only thing happening now. "I'm on aircraft November 7801, currently taxiing for departure at Hartsfield-Jackson. Exit door 2L has a malfunctioning status indicator. The warning light has been cycling red-orange-green, indicating a potential seal or lock failure. Flight crew observed this issue, reset it twice, and deliberately chose not to report it to the captain." He paused, connecting dots. "Patricia, I reviewed maintenance logs this morning. This aircraft underwent scheduled maintenance 48 hours ago. Work order included door mechanisms. Given this malfunction is occurring immediately after that maintenance, there's a reasonable possibility this is an installation error, not a sensor glitch. If it's procedural, then every aircraft from that maintenance cycle could have similar problems." His voice intensified. "This isn't just about one aircraft. We need to assume worst case. We need FAA involvement. We need inspections before any more of these aircraft fly." Silence. Then Patricia's voice, tight. "Calvin, you're saying we need to ground the entire 787 fleet at Atlanta?" "Yes, until we know the scope. We have a confirmed malfunction, crew failure to report per protocol, and maintenance history suggesting this could be systemic. If we don't act now, we could be looking at catastrophic failure." "Jesus, okay, hold on, I'm patching in Daniel Moore." Clicking sounds. A new voice joined, deep and authoritative. "This is Daniel Moore, FAA Regional Administrator." "Patricia." "Daniel, this is Patricia Taylor, Executive VP at Skyward. I have Calvin Ford on the line reporting a critical safety issue." "Calvin Ford, the board member?" "Yes. Put him on." Calvin spoke with absolute clarity. "Mr. Moore, this is Calvin Ford, passenger on Skyward Flight 2801, aircraft November 7801, Boeing 787, currently taxiing at Hartsfield-Jackson. I'm reporting a critical safety protocol violation. Exit door 2L displayed warning light malfunction indicating potential seal or locking mechanism failure. Flight crew observed it, reset it twice, deliberately didn't report to captain despite protocol." He continued without pause. "This aircraft had maintenance 48 hours ago, including door mechanisms. If this malfunction relates to that maintenance, we could have multiple aircraft with compromised exit integrity. I'm requesting immediate action. Ground this aircraft, inspect all Skyward 787S at Atlanta before flight. This could be systemic across the fleet." Silence, typing in the background. Then Moore's voice, sharp. "You're certain about the malfunction?" "Certain enough to make this call knowing the consequences," Moore decided instantly. "Issuing immediate ground stop for all Skyward 787S at Hartsfield-Jackson. Patricia, how many aircraft?" 11 at gates, 2 on approach, 1 taxiing, 13 total. "Ground them all, immediately. No Skyward 787 departures until my inspectors clear them. Patricia, get your maintenance chief on site within the hour. This is a formal FAA investigation. If we find deliberate safety violations, there will be consequences." "Understood." "Mr. Ford, thank you for this call. If you're right, you just saved lives." "I hope I'm wrong, Mr. Moore." "That's the right call." The line clicked off. Calvin sat down. First class was silent, every passenger staring. Thomas Bennett's mouth hung open. Amanda looked like she might faint, her face gray, hands trembling. Calvin looked at her calmly. "I did what you should have done. I put safety first." 23 seconds later, the cockpit radio crackled. "Skyward 2801, this is Atlanta Tower. Stop taxi immediately. Do not proceed to runway. Return to gate. FAA ground stop order. Acknowledge." Captain Anderson, confused. "Tower, confirm? We're cleared for takeoff." "Negative. Ground stop issued by FAA Regional Administrator. All Skyward 787S grounded. Return to gate for emergency inspection." Anderson hit the brakes. Copy. Returning to gate. Advise nature of ground stop? Safety inspection ordered by FAA. Contact ops for gate assignment. Anderson flipped to cabin intercom. Flight attendants returning to gate under ATC instructions. Then to crew intercom, voice hard. Amanda, what the hell happened? We just got grounded by the FAA. Amanda's voice barely a whisper. Captain, a passenger reported. A safety issue, with exit door 2L. You had a warning light on an exit and didn't tell me? Silence. Did you or did you not have a warning light? Yes, Captain, but I determined... Jesus Christ, we'll deal with this on the ground. Secure the cabin. Amanda, you're grounded pending investigation. Yes, Captain? In Terminal D Operations Center, Brandon Cooper's phone erupted. His radio crackled with calls. Computer screen cascaded with alerts. James Wilson, Chief of Customer Service, stared at the chaos. What's happening? FAA ground stop. All our 787 S-13 aircraft. How long? Could be hours. James watched the departure board update in real time. On time, delayed. Delayed, canceled. Not just skyward. The ground stop of 13 aircraft at 13 gates created a bottleneck. Other airlines couldn't access gates. The entire terminal slowing. This is going to cascade, James whispered. This is going to shut down Terminal D. By 8:17 a.m., the impact spread. Asterisk 13 skyward 787S grounded. Asterisk 30 additional flights delayed due to gate blockage. Asterisk 43 total flights affected. Asterisk 6,800 passengers impacted PA system. Due to an FAA safety inspection, all skyward departures from Terminal D are temporarily delayed. Customer service counters overwhelmed. Lines stretch 70 people deep. When will my flight leave? I have a connection in 2 hours. Why is this happening? Agents could only repeat, we're waiting for updates. Social media erupted. Twitter, 8:19 a.m. Stuck at ATL, flight canceled along with 40 others. No explanation. WTF is going on? Reddit, 8:28 a.m. Breaking FAA grounded entire skyward, 787 fleet at ATL. Rumor is serious safety issue with exit doors. Comments flooded in. Asterisk, exit doors? That could kill everyone. Asterisk, my friend is stuck there. They won't explain what happened. CNN, filming holiday travel segments, pivoted immediately. 8:33 a.m., went live. Extraordinary situation developing at Hartsfield-Jackson. FAA has issued emergency ground stop affecting Skyward Airlines. Terminal D operations severely disrupted. Widespread cancellations. By 8:45, every local station covered it. Unprecedented FAA action. Safety concerns, ground major airline. Thousands stranded. The aircraft pulled back to gate D23. The door opened. Through came Brandon Cooper, 3 maintenance technicians with diagnostic equipment, 2 FAA inspectors, and Patricia Taylor, executive vice president in an impeccable black suit. She walked directly to Calvin. Mr. Ford, are you all right? Every head turned. The EVP knows him? I'm fine, Patricia. Thank you for responding. We're inspecting the door now. Maintenance moved to door 2. Lead technician Robert Chen opened the control panel, connected diagnostic tablet, ran tests while colleagues examined the physical mechanism. Running full diagnostic, intermittent sensor failure, checking physical mechanism, actuator response, slow, hydraulic pressure, borderline low. 2 minutes. 5. Robert straightened, face grave. Ma'am, we have a serious problem. Talk to me. Sensor failure is real. Frayed connection cable from installation damage during last maintenance. But worse, the hydraulic actuator shows premature wear. Combined with low pressure, there's significant risk this door would fail to open under depressurization at altitude. Define significant. Robert showed his tablet. Approximately 60% failure probability in emergency depressurization. The words landed like a bomb. Brandon. 60%? Yes. And given recent maintenance, other aircraft from that cycle could have similar problems. FAA Inspector Lisa Martinez stepped forward. How many aircraft in that maintenance cycle? Patricia's voice was hollow. 8 over 3 days. Our full fleet is 23. Lisa pulled her radio. This is Inspector Martinez. Confirmed safety violation. Emergency exit door with 60% failure rate. Recommend expansion of ground stop to all Skyward 787S nationwide. Passengers who'd been annoyed sat stunned. 60%. 6 out of 10 times trapped. Thomas Bennett looked ill. You knew it was serious. Calvin shook his head. I suspected. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Patricia approached. You may have saved hundreds of lives, she addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patricia Taylor, Executive Vice President. First, I apologize for this disruption. We've discovered a serious safety defect thanks to the vigilance of one passenger. She gestured to Calvin. The FAA has ordered inspections of all our 787s. This means delays and cancellations. We'll rebook everyone with full refunds plus compensation, but you are safe. The system worked. A woman in row 4. If we'd taken off, Patricia was direct. There was 60% probability an emergency exit wouldn't function properly in certain conditions. Shocked silence. How did you find out? Patricia glanced at Calvin. One of our passengers identified the issue and reported it properly. Every eye turned to Calvin. Thank you, a woman said. You saved us. Others echoed. Thank you. You saved our lives. Calvin nodded, no satisfaction, only relief and weariness at how close they'd come. Helen Davis, still in the gate area, had watched everything. She'd been taking notes on her phone, detailed observations of discrimination that nearly caused disaster. This story needed to be told. The whole story. Amanda sat in a corner, face in hands, crying. She'd realized her decisions that morning could have killed 180 people. Sarah Mitchell sat nearby, also crying, but for different reasons. Guilt for not pushing harder. Thomas Bennett sat quietly thinking about his silence at the gate, about how he'd walked past and said nothing, about how that silence was part of the system that nearly killed them all. The machine had broken. The truth was revealed. By 11 a.m., the full scope was clear. Asterisk Skyward's entire 787 fleet, 23 aircraft nationwide, grounded asterisk FAA inspectors dispatched to 5 cities asterisk at Hartsfield-Jackson. 43 flights canceled or severely delayed asterisk 6,846 passengers affected asterisk Terminal D at 40% capacity asterisk economic impact $3.2 million for the day asterisk inspection completion 48 hours. The story went national. Every outlet covered it. Aviation experts on CNN. This is the safety system working. A passenger identified a problem, reported it. FAA responded immediately. Yes, disruptive, but if one aircraft had failed catastrophically, the cost in lives would be immeasurable. Social media debate raged. This passenger is a hero. He shut down an airport over one warning light. Overreaction. Read between the lines. Black passenger discriminated against, then his safety concern dismissed because of that discrimination. Bias creates danger. Hash flying while black trended. Stories poured in about being questioned about first-class tickets, having concerns dismissed. The narrative shifted from airline safety issue to discrimination nearly caused disaster. By 1 p.m., Skyward stock dropped 8%. Customer service overwhelmed. Richard Hughes, CEO, called emergency board meeting. Calvin participated from Terminal D. The crisis had only just begun, but the system, broken and exposed, would never be the same. While the maintenance inspection unfolded on the aircraft, a parallel crisis exploded throughout Terminal D and beyond. In a small conference room near the Skyward Customer Service Center, an emergency meeting convened within 30 minutes of the ground stop order. Present in person, Patricia Taylor, Skyward EVP, Daniel Moore, FAA Regional Administrator, Brandon Cooper, Airport Ops Manager, James Wilson, Chief of Customer Service, Robert Chen, Lead Maintenance Technician, Lisa Martinez, FAA Inspector. Via video conference, Richard Hughes, Skyward CEO, calling from Chicago, Susan Clark, Skyward SVP of Human Resources, Elizabeth Brown, Skyward Legal Counsel. Daniel Moore opened, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. Let's establish facts. What do we know? Lisa Martinez consulted her notes. Aircraft N7801, Boeing 787, exit door 2L has confirmed hydraulic actuator deterioration and electrical sensor malfunction. Root cause appears to be improper installation during maintenance cycle conducted 48 hours ago. Risk of emergency exit failure in depressurization scenario estimated at 60%. Richard Hughes on screen looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. His face was pale, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. How many aircraft from that maintenance cycle? Robert Chen answered, pulling up data on his tablet. The maintenance was performed by Team Charlie, our second shift crew. They serviced 8 aircraft over a 3-day period, including N7801. All 8 need immediate inspection. And the other 15 in our fleet? They should be inspected as a precaution, but they weren't part of this specific maintenance cycle, so the risk is lower. However, we need to review our entire maintenance procedures to understand how this happened. Daniel Moore leaned forward, his expression grave. Here's the situation. I've grounded all Skyward 787s at this airport. 13 aircraft. I've also notified FAA National Office to issue an advisory for all Skyward 787s nationwide. Your full fleet of 23 aircraft. None of them fly until we've inspected and cleared them. Additionally, we're launching an investigation into Skyward's maintenance procedures to determine if this is an isolated incident or evidence of systemic problems. Richard nodded slowly, his voice hoarse. We understand. We'll cooperate fully. Patricia, coordinate with our maintenance facilities nationwide. I want every 787 inspected. Patricia, her face drawn with stress. We don't have enough qualified inspectors to do that safely in a short time frame. It's going to take at least 48 hours to do it right. Then we take 48 hours. I don't care about the cost. I care about safety. Cancel every 787 flight we have scheduled until we know these aircraft are safe. Daniel nodded approvingly. Good answer. Now let's talk about how this happened. Who made the decision not to report the warning light to the captain? Patricia's voice was quiet. The lead flight attendant on duty, Amanda Williams. I need to interview her immediately. She's here. We kept her at the gate. And the crew member who tried to report it? Sarah Mitchell. She's here too. Daniel stood. Let's do this now. And let me be clear. If we find evidence of deliberate safety protocol violations, there will be consequences. Federal consequences. People could face criminal charges if we determine this rises to the level of criminal negligence endangering public safety. The room went very quiet. The weight of potential criminal prosecution hung in the air like a physical presence. At gate D23, Amanda Williams sat in a corner chair as far from other people as she could manage. Her face was buried in her hands. She'd been crying, though she was trying to stop, trying to pull herself together, knowing that completely breaking down wouldn't help anything and might make things worse. But the realization kept crashing over her in waves. Her decisions that morning could have killed 180 people. Not might have, could have. 60% failure rate. More likely than not, that door wouldn't have opened if they'd needed it. People trapped, people dying, because she'd been too proud, too angry, too defensive to admit she might be wrong. Sarah Mitchell sat 3 seats away, also crying, but for different reasons. Sarah felt crushing guilt for not pushing harder, for not going directly to the captain, for retreating when Amanda shut her down. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, the blinking warning light, Amanda's dismissal, her own weak protest, her choice to back down instead of standing firm. Around them, passengers from Flight 2801 had been deplaned and were waiting in the gate area for information about rebooking. Most were on their phones, texting family members about the delay, checking for alternate flights, posting about the experience on social media. The gate area hummed with low conversations, the clicking of laptop keys, the occasional frustrated outburst. Helen Davis sat in her original seat, watching. She'd been observing this entire drama from the beginning, and she'd been taking detailed notes on her phone, timestamps, direct quotes she'd overheard, observations about body language and tone. Because Helen knew this story needed to be told, the whole story, not just the sanitized airline version, not just safety issue discovered and resolved, but how discrimination at the gate had led to dismissing a safety concern, how bias had nearly caused disaster. Calvin Ford sat by himself near the windows overlooking the tarmac, watching aircraft sitting motionless at gates, the busiest airport in the world temporarily frozen. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from Patricia coordinating logistics, messages from other board members who'd heard the news, messages from his CFO asking if he was okay, messages from his lawyer asking if he needed legal counsel. He ignored most of them. He was thinking about statistics again, about patterns, about the 47 times he'd been discriminated against, and how this was different from all the others because this time, staying silent might have cost lives. Thomas Bennett approached hesitantly, interrupting Calvin's thoughts. "Mr. Ford, can I talk to you for a minute?" Calvin looked up. "Of course, please sit." Thomas sat down heavily in the adjacent seat, struggling to find words. "I need to apologize to you." "For what?" "For not speaking up earlier. At the gate, when that flight attendant was questioning you. I saw what was happening. I knew it was wrong. I knew exactly what she was doing and why. And I said nothing. I just walked past you and got on the plane and told myself it wasn't my problem." Calvin nodded slowly. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because sitting on that plane as we were taxiing back, I realized something. I realized that if you hadn't been on this flight, if you hadn't had the knowledge and the authority and the courage to make that phone call, we probably would have taken off. And maybe we would have been fine. Or maybe something would have gone wrong at 35,000 feet and people would have died. And part of the reason we almost took off with a dangerous aircraft is because people like me stay silent when we see injustice." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We recognize it. We feel uncomfortable about it. We think that's not right or that seems unfair. But we don't actually do anything. We don't speak up. We don't use whatever privilege or authority we have to say, 'This isn't okay.' We just walk past. And that silence enables the system to keep functioning the way it does." Calvin studied him for a moment. "What are you going to do differently next time?" "I'll speak up. I promise you that. Whatever it costs me professionally or socially, next time I see someone being profiled or discriminated against or dismissed, I won't be silent. I'll use my voice." "Good. Hold yourself to that promise. Because there will be a next time, somewhere, somehow. Maybe not on a plane, maybe in your office or at a restaurant or at your kid's school. But you'll have opportunities to either speak up or stay silent. Make the right choice." Thomas nodded seriously, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Why do you fly commercial? I assume someone in your position could afford private jets." Calvin smiled slightly. "I could. But then I'd never see how the system actually works. I'd never experience what our customers experience. I'd exist in a bubble of luxury and privilege and never know if our airline was actually treating people well or just treating rich people well. You can't fix what you don't see, and you can't see it if you're insulated from it. That's brilliant, and also kind of heartbreaking that you have to do that. It shouldn't be necessary, but it is. Maybe someday it won't be." At 9:15 a.m., Patricia Taylor and Daniel Moore entered the gate area, accompanied by Brandon Cooper and Lisa Martinez. Patricia's face was composed but strained. Moore's expression was unreadable, the neutral mask of someone conducting an official investigation. Patricia addressed the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you an update. Our maintenance team has confirmed a serious safety defect with the aircraft you were scheduled to fly on. The decision to return to gate and ground the aircraft was absolutely correct and potentially life-saving. Out of an abundance of caution, the FAA has ordered inspections of all Skyward 787 aircraft at this airport and potentially nationwide. This will cause significant disruptions, delays, cancellations, missed connections. For that, we sincerely apologize." She paused, making eye contact with people throughout the gate area. "However, I want to be absolutely clear. Your safety is our top priority, always. The system worked today because someone noticed a problem and refused to stay silent about it. We will make this right for every one of you. Rebooking, refunds, compensation. But most importantly, you are safe." A man in his 40s raised his hand. "How serious was the defect? Really?" Patricia didn't sugarcoat it. "If this aircraft had encountered certain emergency conditions at altitude, there was approximately a 60% probability that one of the emergency exit doors would not have functioned properly. That means in an emergency evacuation scenario, people could have been trapped." The gate area went silent. The abstract concept of safety issues suddenly became concrete and terrifying. A woman's voice, shaky. "So we could have died?" "There was a risk, yes. That risk has now been eliminated. The defect has been identified. We're inspecting every aircraft. No one will fly on an unsafe plane." Another passenger. "How did you find out about it? Who noticed the problem?" Patricia glanced at Calvin. "One of our passengers identified the issue and reported it through appropriate channels when the flight crew failed to do so. Every eye in the gate area turned to Calvin. He wished they wouldn't. He didn't want to be the hero of this story. He just wanted the story to end differently than it could have. But a woman in her 60s stood up and started clapping. Then others joined. Within seconds, most of the gate area was applauding. Not the polite golf clap of obligatory appreciation, but genuine, heartfelt applause from people who were beginning to understand how close they'd come to disaster. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for not staying quiet." Others echoed the sentiment. "You saved our lives. Thank God you were on this flight." "Thank you." Calvin stood and nodded acknowledgement, but he didn't smile. There was no satisfaction in this, only relief and bone-deep weariness. Daniel Moore stepped forward. "I'm Daniel Moore, FAA Regional Administrator. I need to interview several people about this incident. Miss Williams, Miss Mitchell, and Mr. Ford, please come with me." They gathered in a small conference room, sterile, windowless, with a rectangular table and uncomfortable chairs. Daniel set up a recording device, speaking clearly for the record. "This interview is being recorded. Today's date is November 14th, 2025. Time is 9:43 a.m. Present are FAA Regional Administrator Daniel Moore, Skyward EVP Patricia Taylor, Passenger Calvin Ford, Flight Attendant Sarah Mitchell, and Lead Flight Attendant Amanda Williams. This interview concerns incident number FAA 2025-1141 regarding potential safety violations on Skyward Airlines Flight 2801. He looked at Amanda. "Miss Williams, in your own words, please describe what happened this morning, starting from when you first observed the warning light on exit door 2L. Amanda's voice was barely above a whisper, but the recording device caught every word. "I was conducting pre-flight safety checks. Flight Attendant Mitchell told me there was a warning light on exit door 2L. I went to look at it. The light was blinking. Red, orange, green pattern. I pressed the reset button. The light went solid green. I determined it was a sensor glitch and continued with my duties." "Did you report this to the captain?" "No, sir." "Why not?" Amanda took a shaky breath. "Because in my experience, these sensor glitches happen frequently. The aircraft had passed its maintenance inspection that morning. I believed it was a false alarm that didn't warrant delaying the flight or concerning the captain." "What happened next?" "The light started blinking again. Flight Attendant Mitchell wanted to report it to the captain. I told her it wasn't necessary. I reset the light again. It stayed green." "Did it stay green?" "Yes. After the second reset, it remained green." "And you still didn't report it to the captain?" "No, sir. I believe the issue was resolved." Daniel made notes on his tablet. "Then what happened?" Amanda glanced at Calvin, her voice getting smaller. Mr. Ford, who was seated next to the exit door, asked if there was a problem. I told him everything was fine. He questioned whether it had been reported to the captain. I told him it wasn't necessary. He then took out his phone and began documenting the incident. "How did you respond to that?" "I told him his phone needed to be in airplane mode. He said he was documenting a safety concern. I told him to put it away immediately." "Did he comply?" "Eventually, after he finished his notes." Daniel turned to Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, you observed the warning light. What did you want to do?" Sarah's voice was shaky but clear. "I wanted to report it to the captain immediately. That's what protocol says. Any warning light, any safety concern gets reported immediately to the flight deck. No exceptions." "But you didn't report it. Why not?" "Because Amanda is my supervisor. She has 15 years of experience. I've only been flying for 3 years. She said it wasn't necessary, that it was just a sensor glitch, that we'd never take off on time if we reported every minor issue. I thought maybe she knew something I didn't. Maybe this really was routine. So I backed down. I didn't push it." "Do you regret that decision?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Yes. Every second since. I should have gone directly to the captain. I should have insisted. I should have refused to sign off on the safety check until the captain had been notified. People could have died because I wasn't brave enough to stand up to my supervisor." Daniel's voice softened slightly. "Miss Mitchell, you attempted to follow protocol. You were overruled by a more senior employee. That's not the same as failing to act. The system failed you." He turned back to Amanda. "Miss Williams, I need to understand your reasoning. Walk me through why you dismissed this safety concern." Amanda was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was raw with emotion. "I was angry." "At who?" "At Mr. Ford. I was angry that he'd questioned my authority at the gate. Angry that he'd made me look bad in front of passengers. Angry that he was documenting things like he was building a case against me. And when he brought up the door issue, when he questioned whether I'd reported it, I think part of me just didn't want to give him the satisfaction of being right. I didn't want to validate his concern. I wanted to prove that I knew what I was doing and he didn't." The room was silent except for the hum of the recording device. "So you'll let your personal feelings override safety protocol?" "Yes," Amanda's voice broke. "And I will regret that for the rest of my life. I could have killed 180 people because I was too proud to admit I might be wrong. Because I let my anger at a passenger who questioned me cloud my judgment about something that had nothing to do with our interaction at the gate." Daniel nodded slowly, making more notes. "Miss Williams, I'm recommending that your flight attendant certifications be suspended immediately pending formal investigation. Based on what you've told me here, if the investigation confirms deliberate disregard of safety protocols, those certifications will likely be permanently revoked. You'll also face potential federal charges of reckless endangerment. Do you understand?" Amanda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Miss Mitchell, you'll be placed on administrative leave during the investigation, but I'm not recommending any action against your certifications at this time. Your attempt to follow protocol and your immediate willingness to report the issue when overruled is noted favorably in the record." "Thank you, sir." Daniel turned to Calvan. "Mr. Ford, one more question. Why did you escalate this? You could have simply gotten off the plane. You could have filed a complaint later through normal channels. Why risk shutting down an airport?" Calvin looked at him directly. "Because filing a complaint later doesn't save lives, Mr. Moore. I've seen what happens when safety concerns get documented and shuffled into bureaucracy and eventually forgotten. Someone writes a report. It goes in a file. Maybe someone reads it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they do something about it. Probably they don't. Meanwhile, planes keep flying with the same problem." He leaned forward. "I had the power to stop this immediately. That meant I had the responsibility to use it. Because I would rather be wrong and embarrassed. I would rather have shut down this airport for nothing and become a laughingstock and lost credibility than be right and silent while people died." Daniel nodded. "That's the right answer, Mr. Ford. That's exactly the right answer. Thank you for making that call." The interview concluded. Daniel had what he needed. The question now was what came next. By 1 p.m., the full scope of the crisis was clear. Skyward's entire Boeing 787 fleet, all 23 aircraft across the country, had been grounded. FAA inspectors had been dispatched to 5 major cities: Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Denver, where the aircraft were based. At Hartsfield-Jackson, specifically, *13. Skyward 787S grounded for inspection. *43 total flights canceled or severely delayed. *6,847 passengers directly affected. Terminal D operations, running at approximately 40% capacity. Estimated economic impact to airline and airport. $3.2 million for the day. Estimated completion time for all inspections, 48 hours. The story had gone fully national. Every major news outlet was covering it. CNN brought in aviation safety experts to discuss the implications. One expert, a former NTSB investigator, explained, "What we're seeing here is the safety system working exactly as designed. A passenger identified a problem. He reported it through appropriate channels when the crew failed to do so. The FAA responded immediately with a precautionary ground stop. Yes, it's disruptive. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, thousands of people are inconvenienced. But if even one aircraft had experienced a catastrophic failure, the cost in human lives would have been immeasurable." Another expert, a former airline pilot, added, "What's deeply troubling here is that the initial safety concern was dismissed by crew. That suggests potential culture problems at the airline. Training issues, pressure to maintain schedules over safety, or inadequate systems for crew members to report concerns without fear of reprisal. The FAA investigation needs to look at those systemic factors, not just the mechanical problem." Social media was exploding with debate and discussion. One thread, "This passenger is a hero. He literally saved lives. Everyone complaining about flight delays needs to get some perspective. Would you rather be inconvenienced or dead? Another thread. He shut down an entire airport over one warning light that was probably just a sensor issue. This is a massive overreaction that's costing millions of dollars and stranding thousands of people. Ridiculous. A third thread gaining significant traction. Read between the lines here. A black passenger was discriminated against at the gate, questioned and delayed in ways white passengers weren't. Then, when he raised a safety concern, he was dismissed again. This isn't just about aviation safety. This is about how racial bias leads people to dismiss legitimate concerns from people of color. This is about how discrimination can literally be deadly. That last thread caught fire. By noon, hash flying while black was trending nationally. People were sharing their own stories. I've been questioned about my first-class ticket 3 separate times in my life. All 3 times, I was the only black person in first class. All 3 times, white passengers walked right past without any questions. Coincidence? I don't think so. I'm a physician. I was flying first class to a medical conference wearing business casual. Flight attendant asked if I was sure I was in the right section and asked to see my ticket again. Meanwhile, white guy in jeans and a t-shirt boarded without any questions. My father is a retired airline pilot. Even when he was in uniform, he was occasionally questioned about whether he was authorized to be in certain areas of airports. It's exhausting. The narrative was rapidly shifting from airline safety issue to discrimination nearly caused disaster. By 2 p.m., Skyward Airlines was getting absolutely crushed in public opinion. Their stock had dropped 8% in morning trading. Twitter was full of people saying they'd never fly Skyward again. Customer service phone lines were overwhelmed with people calling to cancel reservations or demand refunds. Richard Hughes knew he needed to get ahead of this. The crisis was spiraling out of control. He called an emergency board meeting via video conference. All board members joined within 15 minutes. Calvin participated from a quiet corner of Terminal D, wearing headphones, his laptop balanced on his knees. Richard opened. We have multiple crises happening simultaneously. Safety, PR, legal, federal investigation. Our stock is tanking. Our reputation is in freefall. Customer trust is evaporating. I need guidance from this board on how to proceed. David Thompson, a board member and venture capitalist, spoke up. The first priority is damage control. We need to get our messaging right. Separate the safety issue from the discrimination issue. Make this about our excellent safety protocols catching a problem before anything bad happened. Don't let this become a story about racism. Calvin's voice cut across the conference, sharp and clear. No. Excuse me? I said no. We are not going to whitewash this. We are not going to pretend the discrimination didn't happen or didn't matter, because it did happen. It mattered profoundly, and it directly contributed to the safety issue being dismissed. Another board member. Calvin, I understand you're personally involved here, but we need to think about the company's interests. I am thinking about the company's interests. I'm thinking about the fact that we have a culture that allowed discrimination to escalate into a safety crisis. I'm thinking about the hundreds of other passengers who've probably experienced similar discrimination on our flights but didn't have the power or knowledge to fight back. I'm thinking about what kind of company we want to be, the kind that hides its problems and hopes they go away, or the kind that confronts them honestly and fixes them. David pressed. Calvin, you're suggesting we publicly admit to discrimination. Do you know how many lawsuits that could open us up to? How much liability? Elizabeth Brown, the legal counsel, spoke up. Actually, from a legal perspective, full disclosure and immediate corrective action might protect us better than trying to hide it. Courts and juries look favorably on companies that own their mistakes and fix them proactively. They look very unfavorably on cover-ups and denial. If we try to bury this and it comes out later, and it will come out, we'll face much harsher consequences. Patricia Taylor added. And from an operational perspective, we absolutely need to fix the culture problem. If Calvin hadn't been on that flight, we would have taken off with a dangerous aircraft. That means our safety culture is fundamentally broken somewhere. We need to fix it regardless of the PR implications. The debate continued for another hour. Board members argued about messaging, liability, costs, reputation. Some wanted to minimize and deny. Others wanted radical transparency. Finally, Richard called for a vote. All in favor of Calvin's proposal, full transparency, public acknowledgement of both the safety issue and the discrimination, comprehensive reform package. 7 votes in favor, 3 against. Motion carries. Calvin, you'll help me draft the statement. We release it at 5 p.m. today, timed for evening news coverage. At 4:45 p.m., Skyward Airlines held a press conference in a meeting room at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport that had been hastily converted into a media venue. Rows of chairs filled with journalists from local and national outlets. Camera crews positioned their equipment. Photographers jostled for the best angles. At the front of the room, a podium with the Skyward Airlines logo. Behind it, a backdrop with the company colors. Richard Hughes stood at the podium, flanked by Patricia Taylor on his left and Calvin Ford on his right. Daniel Moore from the FAA stood slightly to the side, arms crossed, observing. The positioning was deliberate, showing unity between the airline and the regulator, showing that Calvin was part of the company's leadership, not just a random passenger. Calvin had resisted being on camera. "This isn't about me," he told Richard. "This is about the system that failed." But Richard had insisted. "This story is about you. Whether you like it or not, your experience, your decision to speak up, your willingness to disrupt the system to save lives, we can't tell this story honestly without you being part of it." So Calvin stood there, uncomfortable in the spotlight, but recognizing that his presence sent a message, that the company was taking this seriously, that they weren't hiding behind corporate spokespeople, that the person most affected by the discrimination was standing with them as they acknowledged it publicly. Richard began, his voice steady but somber. "Good afternoon. My name is Richard Hughes, CEO of Skyward Airlines. I'm here today to discuss a serious incident that occurred this morning on Flight 2801 from Atlanta to San Francisco. I want to explain what happened, why it happened, and what we're doing to ensure it never happens again." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. This morning, Skyward Airlines Flight 2801 was preparing for departure when a passenger noticed and reported a safety issue that our flight crew had observed but failed to report to the captain. Specifically, an emergency exit door warning light was malfunctioning, indicating a potential problem with the door's seal or locking mechanism. The passenger who reported this issue is Calvin Ford, a member of our board of directors who was traveling as a regular passenger as part of our Ground Truth program designed to assess customer experience. When Mr. Ford reported the safety concern to our executive vice president and to the FAA, they took immediate action. The aircraft was returned to the gate. FAA inspectors examined the door and discovered a serious defect, a hydraulic actuator malfunction that created approximately a 60% probability that the emergency exit would fail to function properly in certain emergency scenarios. The room erupted with shouted questions. Richard held up his hand. "Please, let me finish. There's more you need to know." He took a breath. "The safety issue is only part of this story. Mr. Ford's experience today began long before the door malfunction was discovered. It began when our lead flight attendant singled him out for additional verification at the gate, verification that was not applied to other first-class passengers. It began with racial profiling." The room went completely silent. You could hear the cameras clicking, recording this moment. That discrimination didn't just hurt Mr. Ford's dignity. It created a dynamic where later, when he raised a legitimate safety concern, his voice was initially dismissed. The flight attendant who had profiled him at the gate was the same person who chose not to report the door malfunction to the captain. And when Mr. Ford questioned that decision, she dismissed his concerns in part because she had already categorized him as a problem passenger who was just trying to cause trouble. Richard's voice intensified. "Do you see the connection? Discrimination doesn't just create individual moments of indignity. It corrupts judgment. It creates blind spots in our systems. It leads people to dismiss valid concerns from those they've already decided don't belong, aren't credible, aren't worth listening to. In this case, racial profiling directly contributed to a safety protocol violation that could have resulted in a catastrophic loss of life." He let that sink in. "This is unacceptable. It violates our values. It violates our commitment to safety. It violates the basic human dignity that every passenger deserves. We are not going to minimize this. We are not going to make excuses. We are going to own it and fix it." He outlined the 5-point action plan. First, the lead flight attendant involved has been terminated and is facing FAA certification review and potential federal charges. We have zero tolerance for safety protocol violations. Second, we are implementing comprehensive anti-bias training for all customer-facing employees. Not a one-hour online module that people click through without paying attention. Real, substantive, ongoing training with accountability measures. Third, we are establishing an independent third-party discrimination reporting hotline where passengers and employees can report concerns without fear of retaliation, with guaranteed investigation and response. Fourth, we are expanding our Ground Truth program to require all executives and board members to fly commercially as regular passengers at least quarterly, experiencing our service as customers actually experience it, not through sanitized corporate visits. Fifth, we are commissioning an independent external study of discrimination in the aviation industry, and we will publish the findings publicly, even if they reflect badly on us, because sunlight is the best disinfectant and this problem extends beyond just our airline. He paused. We're not doing this because it's legally required. We're doing it because it's right, because our passengers deserve better, because our employees deserve training and systems that set them up to succeed rather than to fail, and because the aviation industry needs to reckon with how discrimination compromises safety. I'll take a few questions now. The room erupted, reporters shouting over each other. Richard pointed to a woman in the front row. Mr. Hughes, why should passengers trust Skyward Airlines after this? Because we're telling you the truth. We're taking responsibility. We're making real substantive changes with external oversight. Trust isn't given, it's earned. We lost some of that trust today. We're going to earn it back through our actions, not our words. He pointed to another reporter. Mr. Ford, did you use your position on the board to shut down the airport? Calvan leaned toward the microphone. His voice was calm, measured. I used my position to report a safety issue that wasn't being taken seriously through normal channels. The FAA made the decision to ground the aircraft based on that report. But here's what's important. I would have made the same call if I were a regular passenger without any board connection. I just might not have been listened to. That's the problem we're trying to fix, ensuring that safety concerns are taken seriously regardless of who raises them. Another reporter. What do you say to the thousands of passengers whose flights were canceled today? Calvin responded. I say I'm genuinely sorry for the inconvenience. I understand that people had important places to be, business meetings, family events, weddings, funerals, all the moments that make up life. But I'd ask you to consider this question. Would you rather be inconvenienced for a day or board a flight with a 60% chance that an emergency exit won't work if you need it? Those were the only two options. There was no third choice where everyone gets to their destination on time and the safety issue gets fixed. We chose the inconvenient but safe option. Do you think other airlines have similar discrimination problems? I think most airlines, most hotels, most luxury service industries have these problems because they exist in the broader society. They're systemic, they're cultural, and they won't change unless people with power decide to use that power for reform rather than for maintaining the status quo. More questions, more answers. The press conference lasted 45 minutes, unusually long for a corporate crisis response. But Richard and Calvin were committed to transparency, to not hiding, to answering the hard questions even when the answers were uncomfortable. By 6 p.m., it was the lead story on every news network. CNN, airline acknowledges discrimination led to near disaster. Fox News, safety scare at Skyward, what went wrong? MSNBC, when bias becomes deadly, inside the Atlanta airport incident. NPR, aviation industry faces reckoning on discrimination and safety. The response on social media was complex, nuanced, divided. Some praised Skyward for transparency. This is how you handle a crisis. Admit what happened, take responsibility, make concrete changes with external oversight. Other companies should pay attention. Others remained skeptical. Talk is cheap. Let's see if they actually follow through on these promises or if this is just good PR that disappears in 6 months. Still others focused on the discrimination angle. The fact that a black man had to be on the board of directors to be taken seriously about a safety issue tells you everything about the problem. What about all the black passengers who aren't board members, who aren't wealthy, who don't have that power? They're still getting profiled and dismissed every single day. Aviation industry analysts were already writing think pieces for trade publications. The Atlanta incident will be studied in business schools and aviation safety programs for decades. It's a perfect case study in how organizational culture affects safety outcomes, how power dynamics can silence dissent, how discrimination creates systemic risk that extends far beyond individual acts of bias. Every airline needs to look at their own culture and ask, could this happen here? 3 days later, the inspection results came in. Of the 23 skyward Boeing 787 aircraft in the fleet, *8 had the same door malfunction, the one serviced in the problematic maintenance cycle. *15 were cleared for service with no issues. All 8 defective aircraft were repaired, re-inspected, and cleared. Total time to clear the entire fleet, 52 hours. Total cost to airline, $18 million in direct costs, repairs, passenger compensation, lost revenue, rebooking. Estimated additional cost in long-term reputation damage, unknown but significant. But more importantly, the inspections revealed something critical. The maintenance error wasn't just random human mistake, it was the result of outdated training materials. Boeing had issued a service bulletin 6 months earlier updating door installation procedures based on lessons learned from incidents at other airlines. But Skyward's maintenance manual hadn't been updated to reflect those changes. The technicians had followed the procedures in their manual. They'd done what they were trained to do, but those procedures were no longer correct. The FAA immediately expanded the investigation to other airlines. Within 48 hours, 6 other airlines discovered they also had outdated maintenance manuals. Emergency service bulletins went out industry-wide. Procedures were updated, training was revised. The NTSB conducted a separate analysis and estimated that the proactive grounding and inspection probably prevented 3 potential catastrophic failures that would have otherwise occurred within the next 6 months across the industry. Lives saved, conservatively estimated at 500 people. Calvin's one phone call had identified a problem that extended far beyond one aircraft, one airline, one flight. 2 weeks after the incident, Amanda Williams sat in a small office at the Southern Poverty Law Center in Atlanta, participating in their rehabilitation program for people who wanted to understand and confront their own biases. "I ruined my career," she said to Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a black woman in her 40s who'd been running these programs for a decade. "I lost my job. My certifications are suspended. I'm probably going to face criminal charges. Everything I worked for over 15 years is gone." Dr. Hayes nodded, her expression compassionate but firm. "You did. And those are consequences of your choices, but consequences don't have to be the end of your story. They can be the beginning of a different story if you're willing to do the hard work. How do I move forward from this? How do I become someone different than the person who made those choices?" By understanding how you became the person who made those choices in the first place. Walk me through your training at the airline, the explicit messages and the implicit ones, the subtle and not so subtle ways you learned to categorize people, to judge who belonged where, to trust your instincts, even when those instincts were shaped by bias you didn't recognize. Over the following weeks and months, Amanda did that hard work. She attended workshops where she listened to people of color share their experiences of discrimination in travel, in service industries, in daily life. She watched videos of incidents similar to hers, security footage, body camera footage, recordings that showed the patterns she'd been blind to. She read books and articles about implicit bias, about how good people can harbor prejudices they don't consciously acknowledge, about how systems and cultures perpetuate discrimination even when no individual involved considers themselves racist. She watched footage of herself on the security cameras at Gate D23, watched herself question Calvin Ford in ways she'd never questioned white passengers, watched her body language, the suspicion, the defensive posture, the assumption of her own rightness even when she was clearly in the wrong. It was devastating to see herself that way, to recognize that the person on that screen was her, that those choices were hers, that she'd caused harm while telling herself she was just doing her job. But it was also clarifying, painful but necessary. Like surgery, it hurt, but it removed something toxic that needed to be removed. "I didn't think I was racist," she told Dr. Hayes in one session about 3 months in. "I had black friends. I voted for Obama twice. I considered myself progressive. I thought I was a good person. And what do you think now?" I'm realizing that passive non-racism isn't enough, that having good intentions doesn't protect you from having harmful biases, that I absorb prejudices from the culture around me, from media, from society, from the airline industry, from my training, from that incident 5 years ago where I was blamed for not being suspicious enough. I learned to profile people. I learned to trust my gut even when my gut was shaped by stereotypes. And I never questioned it because I thought of it as experience, as professional judgment, as just being careful. What are you going to do with that realization? I don't know yet. I can't get my old job back. My certifications are revoked, but maybe there's something I can do to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else, to help other people recognize their biases before those biases hurt someone. 6 months after the incident, Amanda started working with the NAACP's Travel Equity Project. She spoke at airline employee training sessions, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger over time. She told her story, the whole story, including the parts that made her look terrible. She showed the security footage. She talked about how discrimination had nearly caused a disaster. This is what happens when we don't examine our prejudices, she told audiences of flight attendants and gate agents and airline employees. This is how bias can escalate from an indignity into a safety crisis. This is why it matters, not just because discrimination is morally wrong, though it is, but because it creates blind spots that can literally kill people. It wasn't redemption exactly. She'd done too much harm for that. But it was accountability. It was taking responsibility. It was trying to ensure that her mistakes became lessons for others rather than just being buried and forgotten. Sarah Mitchell was promoted to Safety Culture Coordinator for Skyward Airlines, a newly created position that reported directly to the VP of Operations. Her job? Creating systems that empowered employees at all levels to report safety concerns without fear of retribution. She developed a program called See Something, Say Something, and Be Heard. It included *Anonymous, reporting channels that went directly to safety leadership, bypassing immediate supervisors' legal protection against retaliation for employees who reported concerns, mandatory investigation of all safety reports within 24 hours, monthly feedback loops, where employees learned the outcomes of their reports and saw that their voices mattered, training for supervisors on how to receive and respond to concerns from junior employees, cultural messaging that emphasized that questioning authority in the name of safety was not just acceptable, but expected. 6 months after implementation, safety reports at Skyward increased by 127%. Not because safety had gotten worse, but because people finally felt safe reporting concerns. Problems that had previously been hidden or ignored were now being surfaced and fixed. Sarah also developed training materials specifically focused on power dynamics in safety culture, how to speak up when you're junior for line employees, and how to listen when you're senior for supervisors and managers. She never forgot that day on aircraft N7801. Never forgot that she'd tried to do the right thing and been shut down. Never forgot how her silence, however justified by hierarchy, had almost cost lives. She made it her mission to ensure no other junior employee would face that impossible choice without support. Helen Davis, the retired teacher who'd witnessed everything from the gate area, became something of a local celebrity. She was interviewed by NPR, by local Atlanta news stations, by aviation safety podcasts, by civil rights organizations. Her message was consistent. I'm 68 years old. I've seen discrimination my entire life. But that day, I saw what happens when someone with power decides to use it for good. And I saw what happens when ordinary people witness injustice and speak up, even in small ways. I yelled out from the gate area, she told an NPR interviewer. I told them to let that man board. It didn't fix anything by itself. But it added to the pressure. It reminded the people with power that they were being watched, that their choices mattered, that there would be witnesses to their actions. That matters. Bearing witness matters. She became an advocate for bystander intervention training, teaching people how to speak up when they saw discrimination, how to be allies, how to use whatever privilege or voice they had to stand with those being treated unjustly. Most people are good, she said in speeches and interviews. But good people who stay silent allow bad systems to continue. We need to teach people that speaking up isn't just for heroes. It's for everyone. You don't need to be Calvin Ford with millions of dollars and a seat on the board. You just need to be willing to say this isn't right when you see something wrong. Thomas Bennett, the CFO who'd said nothing at the gate but felt guilty after, made changes in his own life. He started speaking up at his company when he saw unfair treatment. When a black colleague was repeatedly interrupted in meetings, Thomas interrupted the interrupters. "Hold on, Marcus was speaking. Let him finish." When the company was interviewing candidates, and he heard other executives make comments about someone being not a cultural fit in ways that seemed like code for not white, he pushed back. "What specific cultural issues are you seeing? Because from where I sit, she has all the qualifications we need and brings perspectives we're missing." When he saw security guards in his building following a black employee more closely than white employees, he said something to building management. Were his individual actions revolutionary? No, but they shifted the culture incrementally. Other people started speaking up too. The company became a place where discrimination was less tolerated, less normalized, less invisible. Thomas never forgot Calvin's question. "What will you do next time?" He made sure his answer was, "I'll speak up." He also donated significantly to civil rights organizations and bystander intervention training programs, putting his money where his mouth was. Calvin Ford continued flying commercially, though he was recognized more often now, which made the ground truth auditing less effective. But he expanded the program at Skyward. Every executive and board member was required to fly commercially at least once per quarter, without advance notice to operations, experiencing the service as regular customers. They filed reports about their experiences, the good and the bad. And those reports drove real policy changes. Asterisk improved training programs with specific anti-bias components, asterisk. Better compensation and working conditions for flight attendants and gate agents, recognizing that burned-out, stressed employees were more likely to make bad decisions. Asterisk updated customer service protocols with clear guidelines about when additional verification was appropriate and what constituted profiling, asterisk. Stricter anti-discrimination policies with real consequences for violations. The Ground Truth program became a model. Other airlines adopted similar approaches. Hotels started doing it. Retail chains experimented with it. The idea spread. You can't fix what you don't see, and you don't see it if you're always insulated from it. Calvin also started mentoring young executives of color in the aviation industry. He shared his 47 stories, not to traumatize them, but to prepare them, to let them know they weren't alone, to teach them strategies for navigating discrimination while maintaining their dignity. And he taught them, when you get power, and you will get power if you persist, use it wisely. Use it to open doors for others. Use it to change systems, not just your own circumstances. Use it to make sure the next generation doesn't have to count their own incidents of discrimination the way I counted mine. He never forgot those 47 times. But after the incident at Hartsfield-Jackson, he noticed something. The frequency decreased. Not to zero. Racism didn't disappear just because one airline implemented reforms. But the rate dropped noticeably. In the 2 years following the incident, Calvin experienced what he categorized as discrimination maybe 3 or 4 times, compared to what would have been 15 or 20 based on previous patterns. Change was possible, slow, incomplete, imperfect, but real. 18 months after the incident, Calvin stood at a podium in Geneva, Switzerland, giving the keynote address at the International Air Transport Association's annual conference. The audience was filled with airline executives, regulators, safety experts from around the world. "How many of you," Calvin began, "have dismissed a concern from someone because of who they were rather than what they said?" Uncomfortable shifting in the seats, people avoiding eye contact. Be honest with yourselves. We've all done it. We evaluate the person before we evaluate the issue. Are they credible? Are they important? Do they know what they're talking about? And our judgments are filtered through our biases, conscious and unconscious, their race, their age, their gender, their position in the hierarchy, their accent, how they dress, whether they look like they belong. He told the story of Flight Sky 2801, every detail, the discrimination at the gate. The warning light, the dismissal of his concerns, the phone call, the shutdown, the discovery of the 60% failure rate. the industry-wide implications. Here's what's critical to understand, he said. The safety issue and the discrimination weren't separate problems. They were the same problem. The flight attendant who profiled me at the gate was the same person who dismissed my safety concerns later. She'd decided I wasn't credible, that I didn't belong, that I was just a problem passenger. And once that categorization happened, everything I said was filtered through that lens. Discrimination doesn't just harm dignity. It corrupts judgment. It creates blind spots. It leads organizations to miss critical information because they've decided certain voices don't matter. He presented data from the comprehensive industry study Skyward had commissioned. 67% of Black frequent flyers reported being questioned about their tickets at least once. 43% reported having safety or service concerns dismissed by crew. Airlines with better diversity in leadership had 31% fewer safety incidents. Airlines with robust anti-discrimination training had 24% fewer customer complaints and 19% better employee retention. The correlation is clear, Calvin said. Inclusive cultures are safer cultures. Organizations that listen to all voices are more likely to catch problems early. Companies that treat all customers with equal dignity are more likely to treat all concerns with equal seriousness. He concluded, the aviation industry has built the safest transportation system in human history. We achieved that through relentless attention to detail, through learning from failures, through creating cultures where anyone, regardless of rank, can stop an operation if they see something wrong. Now we need to extend that same principle to how we treat people. Create cultures where discrimination is treated as seriously as any other safety threat, because it is a safety threat. It corrupts judgment, it silences voices, it creates blind spots, and in our industry, blind spots kill people. That day at Hartsfield-Jackson, staying silent wouldn't have kept me safer. Only speaking up did. Only being willing to disrupt, to be uncomfortable, to use whatever power I had, only that created change. So I'm asking each of you, what will you do with your power? When you see discrimination, will you address it? When concerns are dismissed, will you insist they be heard? When you have a choice between convenience and integrity, which will you choose? The answer to those questions will determine whether our industry lives up to its safety reputation in all aspects of our operations, not just the mechanical ones. The speech received a standing ovation. Not everyone agreed. Some thought he was being too political, bringing social justice issues into technical aviation matters. But many understood. Many had seen similar dynamics in their own organizations, and many wanted to do better. 2 years after the incident, on a Tuesday morning in November, Calvin walked through Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport one more time. Flying to Los Angeles for a board meeting, first class, seat 3A. Same plain polo shirt and jeans, same worn backpack, same scuffed sneakers. At gate D23, the same gate where everything had happened, he checked in for his flight. The gate agent, a young man named Marcus, scanned his boarding pass without hesitation. Good morning, Mr. Ford. Seat 3A, you're all set. Have a great flight today. Thank you. He boarded. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant greeted him with a genuine smile. Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. Your seat is 3A, right up here on the left. Thank you. He found his seat, stowed his bag, settled in. The cabin filled with passengers. The door closed. Safety checks were conducted thoroughly. When a flight attendant found a small orange warning light at exit 3L, she didn't reset and ignore it. Hey, can you check this? Exit 3L has a status warning. Her colleague consulted a checklist. Protocol says report any exit warning to the captain before pushback, even if it seems minor. They used the intercom. Captain, we've got a status light on exit 3L. Probably nothing, but we're reporting per protocol. The captain's voice came back immediately. Good catch. I'll come take a look before we push. The captain emerged from the cockpit, examined the light, ran a quick diagnostic on his tablet. Shows a minor pressure sensor calibration drift. Not critical, but let's get maintenance to verify before we depart. Better safe than sorry. Maintenance was called. They boarded, examined the door, ran tests. Turned out to be a minor issue, easily fixed in 20 minutes, no actual danger. But they'd followed protocol. They'd checked. They'd prioritized safety over schedule. The flight departed 23 minutes late. Not a single passenger complained. The captain had explained clearly. We found a small equipment irregularity. Out of an abundance of caution, we're verifying everything is perfect before we fly. Your safety is always our top priority. Thank you for your patience. Calvin sat in seat 3A, looking out the window as the aircraft finally took off, climbing through clouds over Atlanta, morning sun breaking through, and he smiled. The system was working. Not perfectly. Not everywhere. Discrimination hadn't vanished. Racism wasn't solved. There was still so much work to do. But here, on this flight, on this day, the crew had done everything right. They'd noticed a problem. They'd reported it without hesitation. They'd prioritized safety over schedule. They'd trusted their training. They'd done their jobs the way they were supposed to be done. And maybe, just maybe, part of the reason was what had happened 2 years ago. The training that had followed. The culture shift. The message sent industry-wide. We don't dismiss safety concerns, and we don't dismiss the people who raise them. The aircraft climbed through 35,000 feet, leveled off, began its journey westward across the country. Calvin opened his laptop to prepare for his board meeting. But his mind wandered to statistics, to patterns, to the number he'd been tracking for so long. 47 times in his life, he'd been discriminated against in ways big enough to count, to document, to remember. 47 times before that day at Hartsfield-Jackson. How many times since then? He'd flown regularly for 2 years. Dozens and dozens of flights. Hotels, restaurants, stores, all the places where discrimination had been routine. The count since that day, 3 incidents. 3 in 2 years compared to what would have been maybe 15 or 20 based on previous patterns. Was it because he was more recognizable now? Possibly. His face had been on the news. Some people knew who he was. But also, the training had worked. The policy changes had worked. The culture shift was real, even if incomplete. Change was possible. Not easy, not fast, not complete, but possible. And it had started with one phone call. One person deciding that silence wasn't acceptable. One moment when someone with power chose to use it not just for themselves, but for a principle, for safety, for justice, for the idea that everyone deserved to be heard regardless of what they looked like or where they sat in the hierarchy. Sometimes justice came from courtrooms and legislation and grand political movements. But sometimes it came from smaller acts of courage. From one person saying, enough. From someone deciding the cost of disruption was worth it if it meant making things better, even incrementally. Even imperfectly. Calvin closed his laptop. He looked out at the sky, endless blue stretching to the horizon, clouds below like a cotton landscape, the curvature of the earth barely visible at this altitude. Somewhere down there, right now, someone was being discriminated against. Someone was being dismissed, profiled, told they didn't belong. Someone was raising a concern that wasn't being heard. He couldn't fix all of it. No one person could. But he'd fix some of it. He'd moved the needle. He'd made it a little bit easier for the next person, and the person after that, and the generation after that. That was enough. Not everything, but enough to matter. The flight continued westward, all systems functioning perfectly, all safety protocols followed, all passengers, every single one, regardless of their appearance or their background or the price they'd paid for their ticket, treated with equal dignity and respect. One phone call. 7 minutes, and an entire industry had begun to change. Not overnight, not completely, but enough to say progress was possible, justice was possible, change was possible, if you were willing to make the call.